Welcome to Season 2 of You and Me Kid, a podcast about starting and raising a family on your own, where I speak with other single moms, those still considering, and experts in relevant fields to give you a real sense of what the day-to-day experience of solo parenting looks and feels like. So wherever you are in the process, I hope this podcast provides some support, helpful info, and most importantly, humor. Thanks so much for listening. Now let's get to it. I'm so excited to share today's chat with you. I'm talking to an amazing mom named Natalie. She is a single parent of 2 kiddos. Her older son, who is 10, joined her family via adoption, and her younger child through fertility treatments. We talk a lot about the specifics of the adoption process and how it may be different for those pursuing single parenthood than partnered couples, and what that process looks like and what folks should prepare for if they're considering that as an option. We also talk a lot about the logistics of managing a 10-year-old and a toddler solo, and how Natalie successfully travels to Africa alone with both babies every summer, and what her global adventure hacks are. I loved my chat with Natalie, and I hope you enjoy it too. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. As you know, this season I partnered up with California Cryobank, the #1 sperm bank in the US. California Cryobank ships to over 40 countries and has one of the largest and most diverse selection of donors out there. They are offering my listeners an amazing deal for Season 2 that gives you free access to their Level 2 subscription, which lets you check out baby and adult photos of the donors. To use this code, visit cryobank.com or click the link in the episode description and use my promo code YouMeKid, YOUMEKID, for a free Level 2 subscription to their donor catalog. California Cryobank has helped tens of thousands create the family of their dreams, and hopefully you're next. Now, let's get back to it. Okay, awesome. So you listened to the podcast a little bit, and so typically what I like to do is just start with when the idea of having a baby on your own first came into your mind, and how you got started with the process, kind of educating yourself and choosing a path.
Okay. Well, like a lot of people, I always wanted to be a mom from the time I was little, and I just always drawn to baby, little kids and all of that my whole life. And I think when I talk to people who go into like solo mothering, that tends to be a common thing that I hear, although of course it's not always, but so just a lot of kids. And I had babysat, had been a teacher and a nanny and all these things. And I always knew I wanted to be a mom, and I really thought I'd be a mom like in my 20s, So I would say the first time I started thinking about doing it on my own, so shifting it from thinking I would be doing it, with a husband and in a traditional family, I really started thinking about around the age, I think 28 to 32 was really hard for me. I'm from Texas. I moved to New York in my 20s, and there it wasn't very hard because everyone was working and kind of doing the same things. And a lot of people weren't thinking about that as young. But when I would come home to Texas, I was like, I'd see friends who are buying houses and having kids and dogs. I'd walk into their homes and I'd be like, how did you get all this furniture? Like, I was just like blown away by how fast like life was going. And I was, working my career in New York, and I was traveling with friends, and it was a great season. But I ended up deciding to come back to Texas when I was about 30. And that time, there were some really great things happening in my family, and they were in Texas, and I wanted to come back and be in Texas and closer to them. But that was a time that also was very isolating for me. I was like, wow, I'm coming back into a world where everyone has really moved forward. And I've always wanted to have that, but my life just kind of took a different path that I wasn't expecting. And I'm so grateful for it, and the opportunity and the travels and the fun and living in New York in my 20s and all that. But around that time, I was like, I wonder if I'll meet anyone ever. Like, I just felt like, I don't know, everyone was married. Like, how was I going to meet someone? But I knew I could. But that's when the thought started happening. And somewhere along the way, it kind of got in my mind that, okay, if I'm still single when I'm 35, then I'm going to start this process. I'm not, like, I've had these dreams since I was a little girl of of having, being married and being in a relationship with a man. And then I've also had this dream of being a mother. And I kind of felt like if 35 comes along, I'm not missing both dreams. Like, I'm going to go forward with motherhood, and also because, as a woman, I started feeling a little bit of that biological tick, and you start reading stuff too and going, okay, like the truth is I have a window to have children, but I don't have a window to meet somebody. And so that's where I was like, I'm going to move forward on my own. And I really felt like I knew that I could do it. Like, it just in my heart, I knew that if that was, the direction I was going to go, that I knew God would open doors, and I knew that I had a supportive, village around me of people, and that would be encouraging of it, and just that I could move toward working that out. Also, at the same time, since I was little, I had always also been very open with adoption, and had always wanted to adopt, and had always wanted to biologically conceive and nurse a baby and have a baby and all that if I could. My heart was to get to experience both, to do both. There was a family that in first grade, one of my classmates, they fostered babies. And so the mom would come pick up, my classmate from school, and she would have different babies and toddlers with her, and they were, constantly just helping. And I was very drawn to that at a very young age. And I think it was that planted a seed in my heart toward adoption. And so as I even got older, this was obviously, I'm 45 now. This is before, the internet, of course, and stuff. So I literally checked out books and called up in the yellow pages, adoption agencies and stuff like that, to do research on papers that I did in high school to learn more about adoption.
I'm so curious about this path, because it was something that I was thinking about as, some of those first fertility results were coming back and they weren't what I thought they would be, or I was getting kind of scared that the IVF route wasn't going to work. And so I'm super curious too, and I know you did this a while ago actually too. What is your understanding now of how adopting as a single parent in terms of eligibility? And, are there challenges to being a single parent and adopting that a partnered couple wouldn't have? Or what's your perspective on kind of that process?
Yes. It was interesting. Like, initially when I started reaching out to some of the, adoption agencies that are more known, a lot of them would not work with me because I was single. And I was like, on one hand, it was so disillusioning and so sad to me, because here I knew I could be a great mother and I just was like, what? I also was really, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, and I love Jesus, and I'm in ministry full time. And it really, really bothered me, that it was a lot of times it was Christian agencies that were turning me down. And I just thought, I do work in impoverished communities in Africa, and I see the need, and I see the need right down the street, with not having enough hands to help with children. There's so much need. So why would you turn down an opportunity for someone? Some children have nobody, but they could have a mom, So I really think it was a God thing. It was through a friend of mine who had used another agency. I started talking with friends in the adoption world, and she introduced me to the agency I worked with, and who is a Christian. It's a Christian agency, and she was willing to, sit down with me, hear my story, hear my heart and desires. And she was like, "I'd love to work with you." And she worked with me, and has, it was an amazing experience working with her, and she really walked alongside me. So yes, there are barriers, but I do think there's still a way. And there are other some organizations that are larger that do work with single moms, but yeah, there are more, or I say solo because it's just, from the beginning, I just feel like it's more distinctive to say solo than single. So solo mothering by choice, yeah.
And I'd be interested too, in the 10 years since you first started making those calls, if those agencies have opened their minds to it, because the community of women and men probably as well that are trying to become single parents is growing like gangbusters. So I would be surprised if they're not more open to that. But I also want to be realistic to the world that maybe some barriers that would still exist. We're pursuing that. So when you got started, once you found the agency that you knew was going to be really excited to work with you, what are the eligibility requirements to adopt?
they obviously do a background check, like in terms of, crime, that kind of thing, and fingerprinting. They make you have lots of personal and professional references. They want to hear from not just your best friends, they want to hear about you. I know that you do an application and you really share about why, and they make sure that you're financially in a place to, be stable, but not in a, like, you don't have to buy a house. I was renting a place at the time. And so that's not a barrier. You don't have to be a homeowner. And a lot of people don't know that. And you don't have to be sitting on some large savings account, and a ton of money in the bank or anything like that. Cause it was definitely not my story. I had a stable job I had good insurance, they do require you, most agencies require you to get a life insurance policy, in particular, even more so because you're on your own versus having two people, but they require that for two people too. So those were some of the more standard things. Also taking like an infant CPR class and having home visits, of course, with a social worker, letting them come over to see that you have a place for the child and it's safe, and that you have the ability to provide for them. When you're saying provide, they're not, I think a lot of people think I have to have all my ducks in a row and be a homeowner and have savings and investments and all of this. And that is not true. So they're looking for more steadfast stability and support in your life.
That's good to hear. I mean, obviously, I think folks who aren't even looking into adoption, I personally even too thought I needed to have my ducks in a row before I became a parent, right? And it took me a long time to realize that was definitely not true. And certainly as parents, we know we don't have our ducks in a row. So why set that expectation before having a baby? Well, first of all, were you looking just to adoption within the US or international adoption? Were you open to everything? And how long did the process take once you got started?
Yeah. So everyone's story is so unique. And that's why I love hearing, like, this is a great podcast to be able to hear different people's journey and stories because they're all so different. So because I do work in Rwanda, Africa, it's funny. I was open to both. I was open to both domestic and international. However, at the time when I was 34 years old and I was still married, or I was still single, and I was really thinking about this and moving forward with the application process, at that time, Rwanda adoptions were closed. And because I did work there, my heart was primarily, I would say, to adopt domestically in the US or in Rwanda, because those were my two homes where I was familiar. So that automatically shut the door for Rwanda for me, because the country was going through a process of joining The Hague and they had stopped adoptions at that time. So then that made me, kind of look more like, okay, well, let me look here down the street. And the agency that I told you about a little earlier, they do domestic adoptions. And so that's where it kind of just narrowed it down, kind of because of that reason for me. And that's why I went down that path. As God would have it, when it was time, when I actually got the call about my son, he's actually biracial, and he is half Caucasian, half Tanzanian, which actually borders Rwanda. And so his birth father was living in the States at the time working, and his birth mother was here in Texas. So that is, I laugh and I say, well, it was a domestic adoption with a little bit of an international player because it's just how it happened. I mean, it's just funny. And when that happened, when he became known to the adoption agency, they immediately thought of me for him because of my work that I do in Rwanda, knowing that both of his cultures and heritage would be celebrated in his life.
I love that. How long was the process until you got that call? Because I've heard stories, everything from 2 years to 2 months.
Right.
How long did you wait?
I know, it's crazy. So I started paperwork in September of 2012. And by December of 2012, I had everything turned in. So now it was just a matter of waiting. And I had no idea what to expect either. And 2 months later, I got the call about my son. So it was crazy fast. It was crazy fast.
Oh my gosh. And, even mentally, I feel like, that 9-month time frame, if folks are pregnant, does really give you time to prepare. Did you feel prepared? Did it come out of nowhere and you were like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a parent 2 months from now on a Thursday night. How do you even like reconcile with that transition?
So I know it is crazy when I think about it now, but the coolest thing was happening. So because I always wanted to be a mom and always loved children, I was ready from the moment. I felt like in so many ways when I, started the paperwork and stuff like that. But at the same time, and this may sound weird to some people, but this is just my truth and my story, is that God really started talking to me, not audibly, but through elephants. And I know that sounds so weird, but essentially an elephant became a sign and a symbol for me in this process. And I kept seeing them in different places. And what's crazy is that through this time, which was like kind of a summer into fall, when I was doing my paperwork, and particularly in November and December, it was like intensifying. And in January too, intensifying, where like I was just seeing more and more elephants and I was telling people about it. And I was like, an example, I was in Paris in November with one of my best friends, and I was telling her about this before he was born. And as I'm telling her the story, we're walking out of the underground subway and there's an enormous mural painting of an elephant. And so other people were seeing it too, as I was like inviting people into this story, and it was happening more frequently, like contractions would happen, like in the sense of more intensity over time. And I felt that. I was like, my baby is coming. Like, I don't know when, but I feel it. Like, I know. In January, the month before, my friends had planned a baby shower for me in faith, just saying, you're paper pregnant, you're waiting, we don't know how long, but let's have a party for you in February. And so essentially in January, one day I was running errands with my mom, and I had registered for this shower in February. And I pulled into the Babies R Us parking lot, and I was like, I just want to get a car seat. Like, if I just get a call, I just want to be ready. Like, I had bought a diaper bag. I had started buying stuff. Like, when I knew I was going to do this, I bought a diaper bag in London, like when I had traveled that fall before, and I had bought some clothes. And a month later, the shower was scheduled on February 23rd. And then on the 22nd, I got the phone call, and I needed that car seat to go down and get that sweet little baby in Houston. And then I drove back, and the next day he was at my shower at his party. And one of my good friends was like, oh my gosh, what does it say about this child? Like, that he couldn't miss his own party, which is so my son. Like, and it's the funniest thing. And she went and got this big cake for the shower that day. I named him Jude, and she did this big sheet cake, and it just said, "Hey Jude" on the front of it. And my friends that came and stuff, like, they walked in and had no idea he was going to be there. I mean, I didn't know he was going to be there. So everyone walked in, and I have my baby.
Oh my
God. Insane.
I have like goosebumps. That's the craziest thing I have heard in a long time. Oh my gosh.
It was so wonderful. It was so cool.
I have to pivot from that beautiful moment for a second and back up just a half a step. Part of the importance for me of this podcast is being really transparent about the costs associated with all of these paths. Are you open to sharing the cost of adoption if people are thinking about saving? What are the numbers they need to kind of be prepared if adoption is the way they want to go?
I hate the question, but I understand your heart. And I think because people sometimes can construe it. And I've been on both sides of the fence, where I've also delivered my own child too. So I have two kids, so I have two different stories. But I understand for the purpose of what you're saying. And yeah, I mean, I know that it can range from 10, 15 up to, $40,000, like in there for what is considered an adoption fee with an agency. A few things about that is that, it's interesting because when you have a baby and you deliver a baby, there's fees from the hospital and from the doctor and the procedures and all that. So I really see it the exact same way, in that, like, it's a journey to get to your baby. It is costly, but is it worth it? Of course, and I think one thing that's unique and beautiful about adoption is that it does give an opportunity when you're working with an agency. They're nonprofit organizations. So there's actually an opportunity for people in your life, to come alongside you. And if they want to donate and help, they can do that to the agency, and that's a nonprofit organization that they're coming alongside and helping. Because the truth is, this is what the fees are for. The fees are in adoption are for, travel. Every state's a little different. In Texas, there can be some care for the birth mother. There's also the biggest component really is professional counseling. So working with an agency that really counsels the birth mother and before she makes any decisions, to see if there's any way she can parent her child, to plug her into resources if so, and to help find that support. And then if not, and if she shifts to, making an adoption plan, counseling the birth mother through the adoption plan, and then the aftercare of counseling the birth mother after she's made an adoption plan, and then after she's placed her baby with an adoptive family, and all the aftercare and counseling that comes with that too. So there's a lot of people don't think about what is this fee for, and I think it's important to be able to ask your agency, what is it for? What is it used for? I worked with a smaller agency that was very transparent to me. And so, it was a beautiful thing to get to work with them and to really know. Another thing as to why it happened so fast, working with a smaller agency, this agency only works with a handful of families a year, like maybe 5 or 6 families at a time, not per se a year, but at a time. And she doesn't do like, okay, you're number 4 in line, and when the 4th baby comes, that's your baby. She does, this baby is born and really prays through, like, what is the right family, like matching. And that's why when Jude was born with his specific, background that she knew and prayed and was like, it's Natalie, And so while I was waiting shorter than some other people that she was working with, she knew the right match was for us to be together. And I really like that. I like it, that there's thought behind it versus like a list and it's just like the next child that comes along. That there's a little more thought in it than that. So I do think I advocate for people to really get to know their agency and understand how they work, what the fees are, what they use the fees for, etc. Is there counseling for the birth mother? Is there counseling afterwards for the birth mother? Are they available to you, also in walking through this journey? And the woman I worked with, I talk to this day, 10 years later.
Thank you so much for being transparent about that. I appreciate it. And I think I wish the costs of all these paths were a little bit easier to figure out.
Yes.
Especially, the minute you get into the world of fertility, those costs can really get big very, very quickly. And certainly I feel very lucky to have been able to afford that path. I know a lot of people can't even pursue something like that due to finances. And so it's my goal to always just be really transparent with folks about the costs so they can make the right choice for them, and not have to go down one path, spend a bunch of money and back up, right? If you want to be a parent, obviously there's a million ways to do that. And the money sometimes does matter in terms of which to choose. So thank you for being honest about that. I appreciate it. Okay, so you get this call, you already have a car seat. I cannot believe your baby was at your baby shower.
I know.
at that. What was that first day, those first few months like? Did you take maternity leave? Did you have folks supporting you? How did you kind of get through that initial phase?
Yes, I did take maternity leave. I worked full time for an organization, a ministry, and it was really beautiful. When I started to go down this journey, they were super supportive. I wanted to be transparent, and we're a small organization. I wanted to tell them, and I knew I would get a sweet response. And then we were so small that I was like, would now be a good time to maybe write maternity into our employee handbook, maternity leave? And they were like, absolutely. And that's really what helped us shape that, which was great. So at the time, I got 8 weeks off, which was wonderful. And being able to just kind of hunker in with the baby. And yes, I have family that lives in town. At the time I was living in Austin. And so my parents were nearby, and I had some of my best friends right there, who were a big part of just, like getting to do life together. And in particular, one of my best friends, we were having like we had little boys within months of each other, and never in a million years would have dreamt that we would get to do that together. And her firstborn is my goddaughter. And then her secondborn was, within 6 months of each other. And their names are Jude and James, which Jude and James are brothers of Jesus and brothers, in the Bible. And so that's really sweet because we tell that they're like brothers and they've been raised together like that. And then as God would have it, we ended up having almost 4.5 years later for me, babies within 8 weeks apart. So her second and third and my 1 and 2. We've been able to do life together like that. And that's been so sweet. And my parents are a huge, huge part of our village, so that when I went back to work, I was able to, have my mom and dad help, and then also have some people help as it relates to babysitting when he was newborn. But then I was able to get him into a sweet little Mother's Day out program that was near my house that I could afford. And then my family could help supplement it on days that I needed that. Like if I couldn't pick up and work from home for a little while longer, if I had external meetings or something, that I could call either a friend or my parents to go get Jude from Mother's Day out, and then have him in the afternoon before I finished work. So I will say, those early years, it's a lot of piecing it together. I didn't find I didn't want or need, and I couldn't afford per se the full-time, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. coverage of the daycare. I couldn't do that. And I didn't want to do that, and one of the things too about being a little older, I'd say at the time being 35, was that my career was in a place where I had, in a sense, earned some flexibility that you don't normally get right out of college, or right in your first job, whatever your path is. And so, it does take time to get yourself into a position where it was important to me personally that I wanted to be able to do the dropping off and the picking up and spending time each day as much as I could, and was super grateful to have both a job that had some flexibility with that and family and friends who were willing to help me.
And how old is Jude now?
He's 10. So he's in fifth grade and he's 10.
Hit the double digits.
Yes.
So
yes,
you now have 2.
Yes.
I have a 1-year-old. I've been joking with friends that right around the 1-year mark, something happens in your brain, in your heart. I don't know what it is, but I was like, I want more kids. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's it is in my head. It's something I'm thinking about. I'm so curious to ask kind of, were you still a solo parent when you decided to have a second baby? And how did growing your family start, and how did kind of IUI end up being your path?
The way. Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, I'm still solo mothering to this day. So here I am 10 years later. So that hasn't changed. And yeah, I like what you said, I feel like becoming a mom, I always knew I wanted to be. And then when I did, it kind of did open Pandora's box of I was a person who kind of wanted 4 kids forever. I would say that when I was, younger and stuff. At this point, I knew I probably wasn't having 4, but yeah, I just loved it. I loved being a mom. I loved Jude, and it was just so sweet. And I wanted him to have a sibling. I didn't know how it would happen either. And I kind of started thinking and going down the road of, do I try to adopt again, or now, at this point, here I am. I'm when I started really seriously thinking about it, I was 37. So I was like, this is, you read all the statistics, and at 37, it says your eggs start dropping off and all this decline. And I was kind of late to the game. I hadn't done anything. I had not frozen my eggs. I had not gone into good fertility, options, all sorts of things. I had not explored that and all of that at that point. But I knew well, now is the time to try biologically if I'm ever going to try biologically, just because of the sheer nature of time and age. So I went in. So I feel like I have a unique story there too. I went into my plain old OBGYN, who's this great man, family man in Austin, and I told him my heart and that I wanted to do this. And I said, I don't have any reason to believe I have fertility issues yet, because I've never tried to get pregnant. And so would you be willing to work with me? I really don't want to be referred over to a fertility specialist when I don't know that that's the problem. Right now, I just need the delivery of the sperm, to be quite frank, would you be willing to help me try, with just an IUI in the office. And I had enough friends go through, at this point, I'm 37 and a half or something. I'd had enough friends go through different fertility things that I just said to him, like, and I don't know if you know much about Enneagram 8. I mean, Enneagram, but I'm an Enneagram 8 and I'm like just a straight shooter. So I was like, look, tell me this, like, I know people spend so much money and I really don't want to do that if I can help myself, And so the question I have is, can we see if everything looks good? One. And so we did some minimal testing. He was like, of course. And that was looking good. And I was very grateful for that because I could have had a very different answer. I did have fibroids, which I knew about, but that, you never know until you try with that. The other thing was, I also just knew, I was like, does it hurt to go ahead and like take Clomid or something like that and do a trigger shot? I had investigated it and do a delivery. And I said, let me tell you my reasoning. My reasoning is I've watched so many women go through this and I have to buy the sperm every time we try this and it's expensive. So my question is, can we just jump through the initial hoops? Like, we know I'm 37 years old. Can we just go ahead and like, does it hurt me if I read a little bit? Yeah, like I'm not going to go home and try for 6 months because I'm here telling you.
Put a little extra muscle behind the.
Yeah, like does it hurt to do like a Clomid? Does it hurt to do a trigger shot to know the timing really well and do the IUI in the office like that? And he said, I think that's great. Like he was like, it won't hurt. And in fact, it'll just tell your ovaries, hey, wake up. We got a job to do,
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And on the third try, I got pregnant the third month. But unfortunately I miscarried. And I can share about that. I'll say this. I went in at 6 weeks and saw a heartbeat and there were 2 amniotic sacs. And I was like, oh my goodness, but we saw 1 heartbeat. So when I went back with 11 weeks, I was more thinking, are we going to see 2 heartbeats in this appointment, right? Or not, or just 1. And I wasn't at all thinking that I'd see 0. It wasn't even on my radar. I didn't even bring anyone with me, like my mom or a friend. And I went in and there were 0. So it was a miscarriage. My body wasn't showing any signs of having miscarried, but there were no heartbeats. And it was so sad and so hard. I had to go have a D&C the next day because I had a lot of fluid because it was a twin pregnancy initially, of all that fluid and stuff. So I did that. And normally me, and then once Jude came along, Jude and I would go to Rwanda in the summer for my work. So this happened in the springtime, the miscarriage. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take a break and I'm going to go do our normal summer in Rwanda and then come back and try again in the fall. And so we did that and I came back and we did a cycle. It didn't work. And the next month it did work. And that was my pregnancy with my second son. Hayes is his name. And so he was born in July that next year. And my pregnancy was really amazing. Like I was super tired, but I was super just grateful to be pregnant and had a really great pregnancy. It was all that I dreamed of too, like just in terms of getting to carry and feel him inside of me and to experience that. And then to be able to give birth and experience that, I was able to have a delivery with the help of drugs, but I was able to deliver. I didn't have to end up having a C-section. I'd had placenta previa, but it moved. And so I was able to deliver and then I was able to nurse him. It was just like such a sweet experience here. And by this time I was just shy of 40. I was a few months before I turned 40 and I had him. So, and that was a really sweet, thing. And to get to see my son Jude become a big brother to Hayes and to see their relationship. By this time, they were a little further apart than I had wanted. It was about 4.5 years apart. And that happened really also because of the miscarriage and just also the time it took to kind of do the research and make it all happen. But it was now I can see what a gift it is actually and how sweet and close they are. They're not too close that they are competitive. They have a really unique and sweet friendship, but it also has given me some time to kind of got into kindergarten as I was needing to start paying for preschool and, childcare a little.
Yeah. That was kind of a little financial gift for sure.
Yes. And I didn't really, I wasn't thinking about it at the time, but it's been great. And same thing, like my first will go through high school and he'll go on to college, and the next one, Hayes will enter into high school. And same with Jude will exit college as Hayes is entering college. And so if that's the path they take. So just things like that have been really great with the spacing that I didn't think about until I realized it later. And then also just the whole, I feel super grateful that my doctor worked with me the way he did. Like a lot of doctors would just say like, go over and then, to a fertility person, and then they would start with their systems that seem like a lot of things that sometimes they're not necessary. And I was grateful to get to skip that, to not have more things that I needed to do, and that he was willing to kind of jump to stage 3, if you will. Because I think a lot of times they'll say, go home and try for 6 months. And then if you're not pregnant, let's maybe put you on Clomid, and then try that for 6 months. And then if that's not working, then let's consider an IUI, like in that whole thing. I was super grateful that I did research. I talked with friends. I came in prepared, and I asked them, hey, will you work with me in your office? And it really made it a lot less expensive. And I'll, what I mean by that is vials of sperm are like $800 to $1,200, somewhere in there and so that's each time. And for me, it cost $120 cash in the office to do an IUI. And that was it.
That's incredible.
And all my other care was taken care of through my insurance. So like my sonograms and ultrasounds and all the regular things once I was pregnant, at the caretaking and my labor and delivery and all of that were all just like anyone else's would be on their insurance.
I'm so impressed with how much knowledge you went into the office with. I think that's also kind of a big part of this podcast too, is having the education to be able to advocate for yourself.
Yes.
Because one of the things I find folks don't know when they go into this process is how long it takes. Like the breaks in between cycles when you can do your first try and your second try is a lot longer than folks realize. And so if you think, oh, I'll meet with my doctor in November and be pregnant by January, that's not the way it's going to work, right? There is a lot of planning and timing in their schedules and your cycle. And so getting started earlier, even if getting started just means educating yourself and getting some baseline testing, I think is really important, because it just takes a while.
I agree.
Longer than people realize. What I'm also thinking in my head too, selfishly, is I've been thinking about having another baby, and the logistics of like getting in and out of a car, going in and out of a grocery store. How do I, with 2 hands, handle these 2 creatures, at different times and make sure they're safe? And you actually timed it pretty well, because I feel like a 4.5-year-old has a little bit more autonomy than if you did a good job with that, it feels like.
I know. And that's like my experience. Like I said, like I initially didn't, it was kind of sad that they were more spaced apart, but then it really was a blessing in so many ways. I could say to my 10-year-old, my now 10-year-old, sorry, but at the time to Jude when he was 4.5, will you go get mommy a diaper and the wipes, out of my bedroom and bring her to me on the couch? And like, he could do that, that's huge. But I will be totally frank and say that absolutely going from 1 child to two children was more of an adjustment for me than going from 0 to 1. And I liken it to maybe a couple having 2 kids and going to 3, because it's the moment you become outnumbered, and that's kind of what's hard. You don't have when a couple has 2 kids, you can kind of divide and conquer. Not always, of course, during the day or whatever, but there's that piece, that's really, I felt it of just going, oh my goodness, there's 2 hearts here for me to care for and shepherd and love. And will I be enough for them? And I had all those questions, and also I kind of was like, it was funny because even when I was pregnant with Hayes, there were moments where I was like, am I going to love this baby as much as I love Jude? Like I was worried, and it is a really beautiful thing to see that like when another baby is placed in your arms, however they come, that they're yours to care for and to mother and to love and shepherd in life, that your heart in that moment instantly grows. There is that space, and it just is just like anyone, like I think all parents would say that, and so that was a really beautiful thing to explore and to experience, after having Hayes. And But there were definitely some moments of going, oh my goodness, like, how am I going to do this? But you do bring in your first time experience and more confidence to, strap in the baby. I'll wear the baby and I'll take the umbrella stroller for Jude in case he gets tired, or like just kind of figuring it out. Also with friends, kind of having that community where it's like, hey, could you keep the babies and I'll take the big kids, to go do something, or like doing stuff together with friends and just having extra sets of hand around when needed. But really the rhythms kind of that you have in your home, it's kind of like this. If someone has had a baby before, and before I had Jude, I was always concerned, like, am I going to hear him when I cry? Because I love my sleep and I'm really concerned. And like, how am I going to get through that time? Because I love to sleep. Like, but I just felt like God did it. Like, I don't know how I made it through it, but I did. And I was a person who never pulled an all-nighter in school or college, or I was always first in bed, always first home. Like, I mean, I was like an old soul from a very young age. And I am here to testify that, I feel like it was supernatural in some ways, like that you get through it. And I feel the same way about going from 1 to 2 and being outnumbered. Like, somehow, especially in those early days, you get through it with joy, like in love and all of that too. It's not just the hard things, yes, are hard, but the more the love and that relationship are so much deeper and so beautiful that it totally pales in comparison to the things that are hard.
Yeah. I have 2 more questions for you. I know you have to go. The first is travel. You said that you typically spend summers in Rwanda with your friends. That's something you guys still do?
Yes. Even as a baby.
To Rwanda with 2 babies.
My 2 kids. Yes.
Tell me the secret of taking an international flight of that length with
I know.
They're not little now, but with 2 little humans on your own.
Yeah. So the baby bassinet in the front is a big game changer. You want to get that seat. You want to call it in the bulkhead.
Okay.
You want to call early, and if they won't confirm it, you want to get to the airport early. You want to go talk to the people. You want to go ask, to have it and that kind of thing. So that's a big piece. As they get older, a toddler, bringing the car seat on the airplane for the long flights. Maybe not for the short flights, but for the long flights, yes, you want to be able to strap them in. When we fly, there is no limit to screen time. None. As they get older, they can have a free for all on snacks and screen time. It is a free for all. When they're toddlers, you want to get all the things in the dollar aisle. You want to wrap them in 20 different things, like foil and saran wrap and gift wrap. So they have to undo it all till they get to their treat. Have lots of those in your bag. You want to give them a box of Band-Aids and let them go to town. Like you just kind of section off. You let them be on the floor. You put a blanket down. You let them be there. That you can let them do cups. It's cups and Band-Aids, water. Let them pour water, anything. Like anything.
Just get to that flight.
And then a lot of strapping them on when they're much younger and walking up and down the aisle for them to fall asleep and that kind of thing. But people have been so wonderful, while traveling. I say yes when someone offers help. That's the other thing. Don't be so proud that you have to do it yourself. Like someone saying, can I carry that car seat or that whatever to the front of the plane for you and leave it there for you? Yes is the answer. The answer is not no because you're trying to show that you can do it all. The answer is yes, because why not? Like people are nice. And also don't be afraid to ask for help. If no one's offering to help, most of the time people around you will. They see you traveling by yourself, they'll offer. If they don't, ask the flight attendant, do you mind, holding my baby while I go use the restroom? And they're happy to do so. Also they'll come up oftentimes, they'll be like, I see your baby sleeping. Do you want a glass of wine? Or they'll be like, do you need any warm water for the bottle? People are awesome. So let them be,
I have found the same thing even with one baby. I've been blown away by the help. One of the things I get asked a lot is, how am I going to talk to my child about how they came into this world? How am I going to arm them with the information around being, having a sperm donor and not a father, or what's that language? How do I teach them? You've got, 2 different kids that came into this world through 2 totally different paths. You've got conversations around a racially diverse family. How have you all worked together to be able to answer that in a way that feels really true for you?
Yes, that's such an important question. It's a big one. There's lots of layers there, of course. I'd say a few things. One is that I've always been honest with them from the beginning about their stories, from the time they were little bitty, even when they didn't understand it, and not too much. I had gone to a therapist before as I was preparing to be a mom and through the journey. And one thing she has always said to me was, you answer, when they start talking, you answer questions age appropriately, and you answer the direct question. You don't give them more than they need to hear. They will ask if they want more. So they'll follow up with another question if they want to dig deeper, but to remember their age and not feel like, okay, here's the moment and I have to share the whole enchilada.
That's really helpful.
Don't do that.
That's a great
it's like, take it a step at a time. And it has been the best advice I was ever given for both of them. So sharing the stories from the beginning. So there's never a moment where they find out something. No, they've always known, because it's something that you openly talk about, whether it be adoption or being donor or conceived. Putting language to it for them. Like for Jude, I say your birth mother. For Hayes, I talk with him about that mommy had the help of a donor and went to the doctor's office. She wanted to grow our family, and I wanted Jude to have a brother or sister, and I wanted this new baby, whether a boy or a girl, to have a brother. And so talking about it like that, a lot of language that I've always used is God makes all families different, and really celebrating different families. And because it's true, some kids, because they're going to be in the world, and that is truth. And so they're going to go out there and they're going to see that some families have a mom, some families have a dad, some families have a mommy and a dad. Some families live with their grandparents. Some families have two moms, two dads. Like they're going to have, it doesn't matter what anyone's beliefs are about any of these things. It's just a fact that that's what they're going to encounter when they go to school and they're in their classes, or maybe it won't be till later if, say, they're in a more protected environment, but that is what they will experience in the world. So to me, it's very truthful to say that all families are different, and I believe God makes them all differently. And so we talk open like that. We'll also talk about, I have had some questions like, well, why don't I have a dad? And a lot of the answers is quite simply like, mommy's not married, and mommy wanted to still be a mommy and to have you. And I prayed for you and knew you were coming. And I'm so glad that you're here. And God has given us mommy and Gigi and G Daddy and, Aunt Carrie and Uncle Temp. And I named all the players in our family of like, who's part of our, our village. Like both my kids have godparents. So we've got like Uncle Michael and Aunt Susan. We've got, they've got these people in their life that are important. And so I tell them who our family is, and that's what we have. And I do like quite simply answer like, well, I'm not married. And so that's not how I ended up having a family that way. But I do tell them like, one day you're going to be a great father. And, I encourage them, like, however your family comes to be, if you want to have children. And I just try to be very open about it and answer things factually. It's even similar to the sex conversations that I'm starting to have with, my 10-year-old about puberty and about sex. They tell you like, be very real, use real words, don't sugarcoat it, don't use fake nicknamey words, like just name it and be matter of fact, but answer it age appropriately. And then as they ask questions, be available. Be present enough to see when your child wants to talk about something. Stop what you're doing. There was a moment I remember that Jude was asking about his birth mother and said, "Do you know what she looks like?" And he was really young. And I stopped the car and I pulled back into the parking space I was in, and I put it in park, and I got in the back of the car. He was in his car seat, and I grabbed my phone and I showed him a picture. I had showed him before. And so I showed him right there, and we talked about it. And, it was a really precious, like very emotional, precious moment. And it's just like being very present and stopping what you're doing, I think, when they want to have these conversations, because they're the ones that are going to, be curious and want to know. And yes, we need to be proactive, like in telling them their story from the beginning, but really trying to be sync with when they really want to talk about something, and being kind of stopping everything and being present with them, and being willing to be open and honest and answer questions. It's not perfect, and nothing is perfect. And the truth with adoption is that it starts with loss. Adoption starts with loss. The loss of the birth family, the loss of the connection with the birth family. And that's hard, and children encounter that or want to process that at different times. And it's very normal and natural for it to be whenever they're ready,
Wow. I have goosebumps. I have kind of tears in my eyes. I'm so in awe of you. I'm inspired by the way that you've raised your kids and on all these decisions that you have made. I feel like this conversation was really amazing timing for me because I've been kind of sorting through some of these big questions myself. I have a million more questions. I'd love to talk.
I'd love to talk again.
I want to be respectful of your time today, Natalie. I'm so grateful to have chatted with you and to be able to have a resource for listeners who are thinking about adoption, thinking about multiples. So thank you for chatting and being available to me and
of course.
So
yeah, no, thank you. I love my heart, I'm very open, and I like to be able to share with people because I if it's the desire of someone's heart, I want to be helping a support piece and a cheerleader for someone to do it.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day. And I will definitely be in touch, and maybe we can chat again.
Yeah, I would love that. And I was going to say, I have an offsite for work, like an all staff. Otherwise, I would keep going. So anytime you want to. And I'll just say one more thing is that one thing that has been hard through the years sometimes is when people will say things to us like, I'm a single mother this week. My husband's out of town, or I'm a single mother, da, da, da. And that is a real big pet peeve of mine that I am still trying to learn how to communicate respectfully and kindly back when people say that, because the truth is, as a solo mother, it's not like you're a single mother, because generally speaking, a single mother even has support every other weekend, or maybe has child support or stuff. And then, of course, a married person most of the time does, right? When you're a solo mother and you do it all on your own, you're not just the solo mother, you're the solo provider. There's not someone that you're tag teaming with, even if it's after work or on the weekends. There's not someone that's putting money in your bank account. You're providing, you're doing all the taxes, and you're doing all the insurance, and you're doing everything, which I know a lot of women do in their marriages. But what I mean is, it's all you versus dividing and conquering however you do that in your family, right? If you are a couple. So I just always like to encourage people just to say, like, we are in this together. There are people who understand what you're going through and understand that it is different. It can't be likened to, friends in your life whose husbands may travel a lot with work, or et cetera, et cetera. It really is a unique space and community. And I just like to encourage people in that way, that they are understood, and also encourage women to say, if this is on your heart, do it. Don't miss it.
Yes, that's exactly what I say too, is there's just no reason not to. If it's something that's important to you, there's a way to make it happen. It's certainly my goal, and with these conversations, to highlight as many ways to make it possible as are out there, so that folks can choose the path that's right for them. So I so appreciate you telling your story.
Me too.
And I look forward to talking again soon. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. For more information about the podcast or me, go to youandmekidpod.com. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you or your company are looking to jump into the podcast world, now is the time. The Plug Agency is here to connect you to the full power of podcasting. You just record and leave the rest to us. The people are listening and want to hear from you. theplug-agency.com. That's theplug-agency.com. Click the link in the episode description for an exclusive offer.